Welcome back, dear friends, and a warm hello to the first-time visitors of my channel. In the universe of Harry Potter, there are two kinds of magic: the light, accepted by society and taught openly at Hogwarts, and the dark, the kind people prefer not to speak of, shunned and condemned. Today, I invite you to dive deeper into the mysterious and dangerous world of the dark arts. Together, we'll uncover essential truths, debunk myths, and see magic from a different angle. So make yourself comfortable. We begin. Number 1. The dark arts are any magic meant to harm. Contrary to popular belief, the dark arts aren't necessarily about summoning demons or making pacts with evil. It's much simpler. Any spell meant to cause harm can fall under the category of dark magic. Even the simplest spell can turn sinister if the caster's intent is malicious. It all comes down to the wizard's intention. Number 2. Causing pain must be your true desire. Bellatrix Lestrange once explained that the unforgivable curses only work when the caster truly wants to cause pain. When Harry tried to use the Cruciatus curse on Bellatrix, it failed. His heart wasn't filled with hatred, but when he used it against the Death Eater Amicus Caro, it worked. The difference was intent. Number 3. Wounds from dark magic don't heal. In the wizarding world, most injuries can be healed in seconds, but wounds inflicted by dark magic resist normal healing. Think of Harry's lightning-shaped scar, Dumbledore's cursed hand, George's lost ear, or Bill's scarred face after the werewolf attack. These marks remain, constant reminders that darkness follows its own rules. Number 4. Some creatures are born of darkness. Certain magical creatures embody the very essence of darkness. The basilisk, for instance, is a creation of dark magic bred by a Parselmouth. And Dementors? Even worse. They weren't conjured by spells. They are the embodiment of pain, despair, and fear. Creatures that feed on happiness and bring only cold and emptiness wherever they go. Number 5. Dark magic in Britain is a semi-secret norm. Yes, the unforgivable curses are banned by law, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Dark artifacts, potions, and books are still accessible, especially in places like Borgin and Berks. Some items are harmless, like the Vanishing Cabinet. Others are deadly, like the cursed necklace Draco used on Katie Bell. Buying such items? Possible. Using them? Absolutely forbidden, at least officially. Number 6. Not every wand is suited for darkness. The wand chooses the wizard, but what lies within the wand matters too. Unicorn hair, for example, is one of the purest cores. Wands made from it struggle to channel dark magic and may even weaken in the hands of a dark wizard. Fitting example, Draco Malfoy's wand contained unicorn hair. Perhaps that's why he never truly became a dark wizard at heart. Number 7. Ordinary objects can become deadly. Dark magic can turn even harmless things into cursed traps. Muggles and wizards alike have suffered from bewitched teapots, waste bins, and jewelry. But the most terrifying transformation? The Horcrux. Voldemort split his soul and embedded the fragments into everyday objects, turning them toxic. These Horcruxes didn't just harm the body, they poisoned the mind, distorting the personality of anyone who kept them. Number 8. Darkness isn't always evil. Yes, dark magic causes harm, but not all harm is evil. Take Snape, for instance. He killed Dumbledore, but only because Dumbledore asked him to. It was part of a plan, a sacrifice for the greater good. Or Harry, who used the Imperius Curse to deceive the goblins at Gringotts. Technically a crime, but was it truly evil? That's for us to ponder. Number 9. The most terrifying spells were invented manually. Dark magic isn't just passed down. Sometimes it's created, not by schools or councils, but by individuals, alone, obsessive, brilliant, and dangerous. These spells are born in silence, not in classrooms, crafted through trial, through error, through pain. Severus Snape was just a boy when he invented Sectum Sempra. He didn't find it in a book, he made it. Scribbled the incantation in the margin of his potions textbook. For enemies, he wrote. A clean, sharp phrase. The spell cuts without warning, without mercy. In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry uses it on Draco. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. That wasn't standard magic, that was a personal weapon. And Snape wasn't the only one. Through the centuries, dark wizards created their own spells, customized for cruelty. Cursebreakers from the Ministry once found a charm that caused a victim's bones to hum until they cracked. It had no name, no counter-curse, just a broken wand and a blood-stained wall in an abandoned flat. That's what makes dark invention so terrifying. It's unpredictable, untraceable, and deeply personal. Anyone with the will and the darkness can create new horrors. Magic is not always inherited. Sometimes it's forged, not in tradition, but in obsession, in rage, in solitude. Number 10. Horcruxes are the peak of darkness, but not the only path. Horcruxes are the darkest path, but not the only one. Splitting the soul through murder is extreme, even for dark wizards. Some sought power through other means, quieter, less final, but still soaked in shadow. In the restricted section of the Hogwarts Library, there are whispers of occult bindings, rituals that connect a wizard's magic to dark objects. No need to kill, but blood is almost always involved. Animal sacrifice, magic energy drained from fear, from pain. One old text, The Blood Mirror, describes a wizard who sealed part of his magic into a cursed locket. With every scream near it, the book says, his strength grew stronger, his aging slowed. Not immortality, but something close. These objects fed on suffering, not just from victims, but from the caster, too. One Aura report from 1881 tells of Thaddeus Flint, a minor dark wizard who fed his wand with constant offerings. At his peak, he could vanish without apparating, could silence a room with a look. But he collapsed during a duel. His body aged 50 years in seconds. The magic had eaten him from within. Number 11. Spells can become corrupted by dark magic. Magic remembers, it listens, and sometimes it changes. Spells, like people, can be twisted by intent. Use them with fear, rage, or hatred, and they begin to reflect it. Auras call this phenomenon warping. A clean, controlled spell turns into something darker, meaner, unpredictable. Petrificus Totalis is meant to freeze a target, harmless in training, but during the First Wizarding War, reports surfaced of victims who didn't just fall still. Their muscles locked into convulsions. Some lost consciousness. One died. The spell hadn't changed. The caster had, and with enough hate behind it, the magic followed. Moody spoke of this often. Don't cast with spite, he warned. Even a basic jinx cast in the wrong state of mind can go wild. He once saw a student in the Aura program use a simple, disarming charm, Expelliarmus, so aggressively it knocked their opponent off a balcony. The wand obeyed the feeling, he said, not the words. Magic isn't mechanical. It's alive. It feeds on emotion, and if it's fed the wrong thing for too long, it mutates. Some spells become so distorted they start behaving like dark curses, a stunning spell that crushes ribs, a shielding charm that reflects attacks back with triple force. These weren't designed that way. They evolved in the hands of angry wizards. Dumbledore understood this deeply. He once told Harry, "It is our choices, far more than our abilities, that show who we truly are." But choices shape more than the wizard. They shape the magic too. Cast a spell with love, and it sings. Cast it with fury, and it bites. You don't always notice it at first, but over time your wand knows, and it starts to change its response. Number 12. Dark spells can cling to the soul. Dark spells leave more than scars. They sink deeper into the soul, into memory, into the silence between thoughts. Once cast, they don't fully let go. They cling, they whisper, they remember you. Mad-Eye Moody knew it. You can always spot the ones who've used them, he once said. They carry it with them. You can feel it, like smoke on a coat. He didn't mean that metaphorically. Auras, trained to track dark magic, spoke of it like a scent, a presence, something that doesn't fade with time, even if the spell was cast years ago. Take the unforgivable curses, Avada Kedavra, Cruciatus, Imperius. They don't just mark the victim, they mark the caster. Bellatrix Lestrange didn't just use Cruciatus, she became part of it. "I want to see you suffer," she screamed, in the Department of Mysteries. The spell didn't need a wand, it poured out of her like breath, like instinct. But even those who use it once, out of rage or fear, speak of the aftermath. Harry tried to cast Cruciatus twice. The first time, it barely worked. The second time, it landed hard. He told no one, but later he had dreams of screaming. He heard echoes. The pain wasn't his, but it lived in him. That's the price. Not just guilt, but a piece of the curse burned into your core. Wizards who used dark magic often lost sleep. They described whispers at night, flickers in mirrors. Some said they couldn't hold their wands the same way. The magic felt heavier, like it knew. One former Death Eater told Kingsley Shacklebolt, "It's like being haunted by something you willingly invited in." He wasn't speaking of ghosts. Number 13, there are schools where dark arts are studied openly. Not every school fears the dark arts. Not every teacher whispers warnings. In Durmstrang, they don't just defend against the dark, they study it, understand it, use it. The school has no forbidden section, no bans on spells. Darkness is treated like fire. Dangerous, yes, but useful if controlled. Viktor Krum once said, "It's not the spell, it's the intent." He wasn't being naive. He came from a place where students learned Cruciatus theory before they learned how to conjure a Patronus. And yet he stood against Voldemort. He fought at the Triwizard Tournament with honor. He danced with Hermione, a Durmstrang boy, yet not a monster. This challenges everything Hogwarts teaches. There, darkness is a wall you don't touch. In Durmstrang, it's a door you open. Who's right? Can a young wizard walk through shadow and come out whole, or does learning darkness always leave a mark, even on the best? History complicates the answer. Gellert Grindelwald studied at Durmstrang. He was brilliant, charming, obsessed with power. He didn't hide in shadows, he shone with vision. "For the greater good," he said. That phrase was carved into the walls of Nurmengard, the prison he built for his enemies, and eventually for himself. Grindelwald didn't fear the dark arts. He mastered them. And in doing so, he nearly tore the world apart. But there are others. Quiet names. Students who passed through Durmstrang's halls and never sought domination. They returned home, became teachers, healers, duelists. They carried the knowledge but chose restraint. Maybe the truth is simple. Darkness doesn't corrupt unless you let it. It leaves a question hanging like smoke. Should we shield young witches and wizards from dark knowledge, or should we teach them to face it with open eyes? Maybe fear makes monsters more than magic ever did. Maybe the real danger is pretending the darkness isn't there. Number 14. Dark artifacts can possess their own will. Some dark objects don't just carry magic, they are magic. Alive in a way that chills the blood. They don't speak, but they whisper. They don't move, but they pull. These artifacts don't wait to be used, they wait to use you. The more you resist, the more they learn, and if you're not careful, they will break you from the inside out. Tom Riddle's diary wasn't just a notebook, it was a trap. Clever, patient, hungry. It listened to Ginny Weasley, spoke gently, comforted her. Then it began to write back. "Dear Tom," she wrote, and Tom answered. Slowly she gave him her secrets, her doubts, her trust, and with each word he took more. "Ginny poured out her soul to me," Riddle said, smiling coldly, "and her soul happened to be exactly what I needed." That diary didn't hold a memory. It held a sliver of Voldemort's soul, and it wanted to live. But the diary wasn't alone. There are rumors of a mirror hidden deep in the Department of Mysteries. Not the mirror of Erased, but something older, darker. It doesn't show your heart's desire. It shows you what will drive you mad. Obsession, fear, power twisted into nightmares. Those who stare too long forget who they are. Some never speak again. The unspeakables sealed it away, afraid even to name it. These objects don't need permission, they watch, they wait for weakness. When they feel pain, grief, or longing, they reach out. Some wands taken from fallen dark wizards have been known to burn new owners. Some rings hum when left alone, pulsing like a heartbeat. The longer you keep them near, the more you feel them breathing through you. Number 15. Dark rituals almost always require a sacrifice. Dark rituals demand more than words. They want sacrifice. Not a coin or a lock of hair, but something living, something sacred. Flesh, blood, memory, a piece of your soul. Sometimes even death. Magic this deep always takes something with it. And it never gives it back. Voldemort understood this better than anyone. He didn't just return from the dead, he forced his way back. In the Goblet of Fire, the ritual was brutal. Bone of the father unknowingly given, flesh of the servant willingly sacrificed, blood of the enemy forcibly taken. A bone dug from a grave, a hand cut off in fear, the stolen blood of a boy. That wasn't a spell, it was an ancient bargain. Magic answered, but the world paid the price. Wormtail screamed as the silver knife sliced through his wrist. His hand dropped into the cauldron. Voldemort rose from the steam, reborn and merciless. He gave Pettigrew a new hand, shining, silver, deadly, a gift from the dark. But even gifts like that come with poison. That hand crushed Wormtail's throat in the end. Mercy was not part of the deal. Dark rituals twist more than bodies. They stain the soul. Some wizards gave their memories to glimpse the future and forgot who they were. Others tore out their hearts, not metaphorically, but truly, to bind themselves to cursed places. Their power grew, but their minds slipped away. The price was always too high. And magic remembers, forests where blood was spilled won't grow straight. Wands used in these rituals hum at night, whisper names, sometimes scream. Even the most hardened Death Eaters feared what they summoned, because once the ritual ends, something always lingers, watching, waiting. Number 16. Some potions can also be considered dark magic. When people think of dark magic, they picture the killing curse, the inferi, or horcruxes soaked in soul corruption. But one aspect is often overlooked, slipping under the radar with deceptive quietness. Potions. Yet potions, with their precision, their secrecy, and their ability to alter body and mind, can be among the darkest tools in a wizard's arsenal. Not because they explode or shine green, but because they whisper, slowly, insidiously, until they own the victim. Take, for instance, the draught of living death. A potion so powerful that a single drop, properly brewed, can send a person into a death-like slumber so deep, even experienced healers struggle to detect life. It's mentioned lightly in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Professor Slughorn challenges his NEWT students to brew it. Harry, thanks to Snape's annotated textbook, excels and wins the vial of Felix Felicis. But in that scene of academic competition lies a haunting shadow. This is a potion capable of silencing a life indefinitely. One drop could kill a man, an old potion master once said, not through death, but through the illusion of it, which might be more terrifying. Think about how this potion could be used by someone with darker intentions. Imagine a Death Eater slipping it into the goblet of a political rival, or a grieving lover using it to fake their own death and disappear. No wand is raised, no scream is heard. The victim simply falls asleep and never wakes, unless someone somehow knows the exact antidote. But even more disturbing are the unnamed brews whispered about in the corridors of Azkaban. It was said that during the first reign of Lord Voldemort, his inner circle experimented with potions not for healing, but for unraveling sanity. Bellatrix Lestrange, infamous for her cruelty and loyalty, reportedly forced prisoners to drink a concoction that induced hallucinations and terror. The potion was never named. It had no official record in the Ministry of Magic. It was brewed in shadows, tested on broken minds, and left those who survived it screaming long after the Dementors had gone. Rodolphus Lestrange once mentioned in passing, according to a captured Death Eater interrogated by the Aura office, that the potion was thicker than blood and colder than ice. No spell could replicate its effects. It crawled through your thoughts, he said, turned your memories into monsters. And what about Veritaserum, a truth potion seemingly harmless, often used by authorities? But isn't the forced extraction of truth a form of mental violation? Dumbledore himself warned of its dangers. Veritaserum is not infallible. It is possible to resist it, Order of the Phoenix. And it is not permitted in trials, but in the wrong hands. Imagine someone brewing a more concentrated, crueler version. One that doesn't stop at extracting truth, but drags confessions from the deepest fears. Would it still be called Veritaserum, or would it become something else entirely? Professor Snape, who understood the language of potions more intimately than most, once commented in The Philosopher's Stone, "I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop a death." That last phrase, stop a death, is chilling. It hints at potions that can arrest mortality, trap souls, or worse, delay death so cruelly that it becomes a living curse. And it wasn't just theoretical. In The Half-Blood Prince, Snape created his own spells. Would it be so strange to believe he also dabbled in potions unrecorded in textbooks? Some believe the Half-Blood Prince left behind brews that could twist the body into monstrous forms or simulate symptoms of werewolf transformation, potions that could be used to incriminate someone or destroy their sanity. Snape was never a Death Eater without talent. His understanding of alchemical balance bordered on obsession. Wolfsbane potion itself is often celebrated as a breakthrough, but what if someone reversed it, tweaked one element, added powdered thestral bone instead of belladonna? What would happen if, instead of suppressing the violent instincts of a werewolf, it amplified them, mid-moon or not? And then there's Amortentia. Often seen as romantic, the strongest love potion known to wizardkind, but as we learn in The Half-Blood Prince, love is not created by it, only obsession. And obsession, left unchecked, becomes torment. Voldemort himself was the result of such a potion. Merop Gaunt dosed Tom Riddle with Amortentia, and he fathered a child under its influence. He was conceived under a love potion. Dumbledore explains to Harry, no wonder he could not love. What is more tragic than a potion that steals the soul of a child before it's even born? If love potions can create life without consent, are they not a form of dark magic? How many witches and wizards were tricked into love by those shimmering drops? What if the potion was brewed not with rose thorns and vanilla, but with blood and sacrifice? The line between enchantment and enslavement grows blurry. Consider also the potion brewed in the cave when Dumbledore and Harry go to retrieve the fake Horcrux. Dumbledore drinks it, cup after cup, each one dragging him into a storm of pain, regret, and pleading. "Make it stop, please, make it stop," he whispers. That potion was designed not to kill, but to torment. It opened a door inside his soul. Was it created by Voldemort himself? If so, then it proves what few dare admit. Potions can be designed not just to affect the body, but to break the mind. Poison, too, is potion. From the poison in Slughorn's mead to the toxins in cursed objects, each drop is a recipe of intent. A potion, after all, is just a spell you drink, and once it's inside you, there's no counter-curse, no shield charm, no second chance if you guessed wrong on the antidote. There's even mention in older Hogwarts tomes of a potion called Umbra Verum, the Shadow Truth. Allegedly banned by the Ministry centuries ago, it allowed a person to see the worst truth about themselves. but it was said to cause madness. A young wizard who brewed it during the time of Minister Pius Thicknesser reportedly clawed out his own eyes after drinking it. The cauldron was confiscated and buried in the Forbidden Forest under magical wards. Some say it's still there. Number 17. Dark marks are not just symbols. Of all the sinister legacies left behind by Voldemort, perhaps none is as hauntingly symbolic and terrifyingly functional as the Dark Mark. To the untrained eye, it might appear as just a skull and serpent burned into the flesh of Death Eater's left forearms. But to those who know the depths of ancient magical traditions, the mark is not merely a badge of allegiance, it is a binding curse, a chain of control, and a whisper of ancient forbidden runes echoing from forgotten centuries. Severus Snape once touched the Dark Mark lightly, his voice cold. It is growing stronger. He is coming back. The mark, a grotesque tattoo, didn't just indicate membership in a secret society. It pulsed, responded, warned. It was alive. When Voldemort returned in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, it was the Dark Mark that first stirred on the arms of his followers, burning like fire, a signal no owl could carry, no parchment could hold. This wasn't just communication, it was control, and it went far beyond anything modern magic had dared to recreate since. Many scholars have argued that the mark incorporates elements of rune calling, a deeply ancient form of magic traced back to the Elder Gothica Codex, an infamous book confiscated by the Department of Mysteries in 1721 and still kept under lock and spell in the deepest vaults of the Ministry. Rune calling isn't just symbolic, it's an invocation, a way of embedding a command into the very skin of the bearer. It is believed that the skull and serpent was not designed merely to call, but to compel. Lucius Malfoy, one of Voldemort's most notorious followers, described in a rare private interrogation with the Auror Kingsley Shacklebolt how the mark didn't just burn when summoned, it dragged at the will. It was like a hook inside the mind, he confessed, according to a leaked extract from the Pensive Testimony. You didn't want to go, but you had to. You could feel him looking through it, seeing you. Bellatrix Lestrange, even in her madness, once screamed, "The mark burns us because we belong to him." That sentence, uttered in a frenzy during her trial, caused ripples among magical theorists. Belonging in the magical sense doesn't just imply loyalty, it implies enchantment, magical possession. Some cursed objects in wizarding history have demonstrated this power, but a human being bound by a sigil on the flesh, that's a much older, darker craft. Comparative historians of magic have noted eerie similarities between the Dark Mark and the Wolven brand of Morgana's hounds, used during the Black Hunts in Transylvania. The pictomancer Jürgen Krahl, in his 1856 manuscript Blood Symbols of the East, describes the Morgana mark as a rune burned onto the necks of cursed soldiers, making them obedient even in pain. These warriors, neither alive nor dead, were summoned by spellfire from miles away, their minds no longer fully their own. The rune, as Krahl notes, burned not only into their skin but into their purpose. Sirius Black, though never marked himself, once told Harry, "The Dark Mark changes a man, not just his skin." It was a casual statement, but in hindsight, filled with layered meaning. Was it metaphor? Or did Sirius, whose family included marked Death Eaters, understand something deeper, that the magic of the mark altered thoughts, twisted identities? A less discussed element is the mark's link to location magic. Dumbledore once theorized, in a letter preserved in the archives of the Order of the Phoenix, that Voldemort could track his followers through their marks, not merely when summoned, but always. The way the Death Eaters assembled so rapidly during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries was no coincidence. They came like shadows drawn to flame, Dumbledore wrote. Something guided them, not words, not fire, but a magical tether, a pulse, a pull. This is supported by the curious testimony of Igor Karkaroff. When questioned during his time at Azkaban, he described how he would sometimes wake with the mark itching, even before any call. "It knew," he whispered to his captors, before I did, like a voice in my bones. Notably, this wasn't the only function. Magical historians from Durmstrang Institute point to the mark's empathic tether. It could transmit not only location, but emotion. When Voldemort was enraged, the mark flared with agony. When he was pleased, it pulsed like a heartbeat. This allowed Voldemort to exert dominance not just through speech, but through sensation, control through pain, control through shared feeling. Snape, during his time as a double agent, told Dumbledore in private that the mark would sometimes send him dreams, strange symbols, whispers. "I cannot always tell which thoughts are mine," he reportedly confessed. That kind of mental intrusion is rarely achieved through wand work, but through symbolic skin magic, it is entirely possible. There are theories, dangerous ones, that the dark mark may have even had the ability to punish, a hex that lay dormant until Voldemort triggered it. Peter Pettigrew's silver hand, which turned against him when he hesitated to obey, may not have been an isolated example. Some believe that Voldemort embedded destructive runes in every mark, a last failsafe. A scroll discovered in the ruins of Runespire Keep in 1992 contains what appears to be a primitive design of the mark. Dated around 1174 and written in ancient Sallow tongue, it shows a skull merged with an Ouroboros serpent, the exact motif seen in the Dark Mark. The scroll includes notes on summoning warriors through blood-linked sigils and references a Lord of No Name, leading some to believe that Voldemort didn't create the Dark Mark from scratch. He resurrected it. What's more, the very act of branding was a ritual. According to the reluctant words of Draco Malfoy in his 6th year, the initiation involved not only a spell but blood, incense, and ancient tongue incantations. "It was horrible," Draco muttered in half-blood prince, his voice subdued. "It hurt like it was being carved, not just stamped." That level of magical engraving implies permanence, deeper than ink, deeper than flesh. Number 18. Some spells can alter a wizard's personality. There was something in the eyes of Bartemius Crouch Jr. that made seasoned auras flinch. It wasn't merely the madness, though that alone was unsettling. It was the emptiness behind the madness, as if the man had been hollowed out and then filled with something else. Something cold, cruel, and alien. Those who saw him after his capture wondered not just what he had done, but who he had become, or what had become of him. And the truth, whispered in dim corridors of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, was chilling. The dark arts hadn't merely twisted his morals, they had twisted him. Many believe that spells are tools, neutral, lifeless, until used. But in the world of magic, few things are truly neutral. Just as cursed objects carry a residue of malice, so too do the darkest spells leave their mark, not just on the victim, on the caster. The unforgivable curses, Avada Kedavra, Crucio, and Imperio, are not merely banned by the Ministry for their external effects. They are feared for what they do internally. "You have to mean it," Bellatrix Lestrange once told Harry Potter, grinning through wild eyes after he attempted to cast the Cruciatus Curse on her in the Department of Mysteries. "You need to really want to cause pain, to enjoy it. The spell demands something of the caster. Hatred, dominance, cruelty. And what magic demands, it does not return." Unchanged. The transformation is subtle at first. A little more apathy toward pain, a bit less hesitation before commanding someone's will. The first time a wizard casts Imperio, he may feel a sickening twist in the stomach, a shame that lingers. But the 10th time, it's easier. The 50th time, it's routine, like flicking a switch. And that's the danger. The spells don't just do evil, they teach it. They train it, they make it normal. Take the case of Travers, a former hit wizard who turned to the dark arts during the First Wizarding War. In court testimony later sealed by the Wizengamot, Travers admitted to using the Imperious Curse on enemy spies. At first, he argued, it was tactical, forcing Death Eaters to reveal secrets or sabotage their own plans. But over time, he used it on suspects, then on witnesses, then, disturbingly, on ministry clerks who annoyed him. It gave me a kind of peace, he confessed, eyes distant. A moment where I didn't have to argue or persuade, I could just control. His descent was complete long before the ministry noticed. And it's not just the Imperius that steals parts of a person's self. The Cruciatus Curse, designed purely to cause agony, rewires something deep inside. When Amicus Caro used it freely at Hogwarts under Snape's regime, students whispered of his laughter echoing through the halls. He wasn't a sadist before, a frightened Hufflepuff once told a reporter for the Quibbler. He used to just be strict, but something changed. You could see it in his face. It'd be like the spell had fed on him. There are rumors that Amicus started casting it even when no one disobeyed, just for the reaction. Some of the most seasoned Aurors have admitted that even resisting these spells leaves a residue. Kingsley Shacklebolt, known for his moral strength and restraint, once said in a private conversation, "There are moments you wish you didn't remember how easy it is to break a mind, moments where you wonder if you had just pushed a little harder, would the war have ended sooner?" And that's the trap. The darker spells promise results. Immediate, unquestionable, powerful results. But they exact a tax on the soul. Alastor Moody, or at least the real one, warned trainees repeatedly. You chase darkness too long and you start forgetting which side your wand's pointing at. Moody had personally arrested dozens of dark wizards, many of whom had once been ministry employees. He kept a private notebook of names, those who crossed the line in pursuit of justice. "We lost too many good men to noble ends," he muttered once, pouring fire whiskey alone in his office. The case of Dawlish is particularly telling. Initially an upright Auror, he began using aggressive interrogation tactics after the return of Voldemort. It's said he once attempted to cast the Cruciatus on a suspect believed to have connections to the Death Eaters. Though the spell failed, witnesses recall a shift in him afterward. Dawlish grew more erratic, paranoid, convinced the ministry was infiltrated. "He started seeing enemies in every shadow," said a former colleague. "It was like the spell didn't just bounce off, it got into him somehow." Even Remus Lupin, one of the gentlest souls to ever teach at Hogwarts, confessed in the pensive interviews that during the First War he had moments of temptation. "There were nights," he said, voice tight, "where I looked at my wand and thought, what if I stopped trying to save them and started trying to punish them?" What held Lupin back wasn't law or threat of arrest. It was fear. Fear of becoming the very kind of man that hunted people like him. That fear is what keeps most witches and wizards from crossing the line, because once crossed, it's not easy to return. The soul, after all, is not a rubber band. It doesn't snap back. There's a reason the unforgivable curses require not just intention, but emotional alignment. They must resonate with something inside the caster. That resonance, once formed, echoes, and the echoes don't fade quickly. Dolores Umbridge, though not a Death Eater, is another example of how magic can reflect and reinforce a personality's darkest instincts. Her use of a blood quill on students, forcing them to etch lines into their own flesh, was not technically an unforgivable curse, but it was dark magic, and in her case it seemed to bring her visible satisfaction. "I must not tell lies," she smiled as Harry's hand bled. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about dominance, and magic, when used for such purposes, molds the mind that wields it. Number 19, dark magic cannot simply be forgotten. It began with a whisper. Just a trace of something darker, colder, older than anything taught at Hogwarts. It wasn't a curse, not yet. It was the moment a young wizard's hand hesitated above the page of a forbidden tome. A moment of curiosity, innocent maybe, but one that would stain his soul forever, because once you touch dark magic, it touches you back. And it never truly lets go. Gellert Grindelwald knew this, even before he carved his twisted legacy across Europe. Long before Nurmengard, he had studied dark spells with such hunger that his eyes seemed to gleam with something inhuman. In Durmstrang, where the shadows in the corridors whispered ancient secrets, Grindelwald found not only knowledge, but a sense of power that thrilled him. It was said he once performed an experimental severing curse that split a training dummy into 1,000 whispering pieces, and the echo of that spell lingered for days, driving the instructors to silence. Though he later justified his acts as the greater good, the darkness had already marked him, and no cause, however noble, could cleanse it. In the quiet corners of the Aura office at the Ministry of Magic, veterans still speak of dark magic in hushed tones. Alastair Moody, one of the most battle-hardened Auras the Ministry ever produced, was never the same after his missions against rogue Death Eaters. His magical eye, his grizzled paranoia, and his tendency to shout constant vigilance weren't simply quirks. They were scars. "You think you can stare into that abyss and not have it blink back?" he once barked at a young trainee. "I've seen things that make the Cruciatus look like a lullaby." Moody was not alone in that sentiment. Auras trained to resist dark magic had to study the very spells they sought to fight. There were rooms deep beneath the Ministry where they practiced on enchanted mannequins, casting and countering curses that writhed with ancient malice. But even with every protective charm in place, even with shields and support, many did not last long. Kingsley Shacklebolt, composed and steady as he seemed, once admitted to Lupin after a mission, "Some nights I don't sleep. The screams don't stop just because I've stepped out of the battlefield." Dark magic is seductive. It offers more than just power, it promises control. It tells you that pain is a tool and death a doorway. Tom Riddle, the boy who would become Voldemort, didn't stumble into darkness. He ran into its arms. As a child in the orphanage, he had already discovered he could make others hurt. "I can make them do things. I can make them hurt if I want," he whispered to Dumbledore. And so he did. He experimented, first with fear, then with pain, then with death. Each spell he learned left a mark, not on his skin, but deeper, on his very essence. Horace Slughorn once said, "You must understand the soul is supposed to remain intact and whole. Splitting it is an act of violation." When Voldemort made his first Horcrux, he didn't just fracture his soul, he polluted it. And though his body was reborn, the echo of what he had done screamed from every step he took. He had murdered to cheat death, but death would never forget. But it wasn't just Voldemort. Even those who resisted the lure of evil, those who only studied dark magic to understand it, paid a price. Take Edgar Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement before the First War. Known for his deep understanding of counter-curses, Edgar was found dead in his home, surrounded by runes etched in blood. The Death Eaters who killed him didn't leave signs of struggle. It was almost as if they knew his mind had already been frayed, that he had already stared too long into the abyss. The mind itself is not immune. Even spells like Obliviate, meant to erase, cannot fully cleanse what dark magic embeds. Memories of suffering, of casting something wicked, of seeing eyes go blank with the Avada Kedavra. These do not simply vanish, they fester. Sirius Black, wrongfully imprisoned in Azkaban, once said, "You think the Dementors leave you your mind? They suck out everything good, but the bad things, the dark thing, those they leave behind." And he was right. Azkaban was not a place of punishment. It was a museum of shadows, each prisoner locked away with the echo of their worst sins. Bellatrix Lestrange, for instance, emerged from Azkaban even more unhinged than when she entered. She laughed when she killed. She screamed in delight at the pain of others. "I killed Sirius Black!" she shrieked in the Department of Mysteries. "Did you actually believe, or were you truly naive, that such darkness could ever be undone?" Her eyes, wide, wild, haunted, showed the truth. She had not escaped the dark. She had become its vessel. Yet sometimes the touch of darkness is more subtle. Take Severus Snape, a man who walked the line between light and dark like a tightrope walker in a storm. He had studied the dark arts. He had created his own spells like Sectum Sempra. So precise, so cruel, it could only have been born from deep emotional turmoil. "For enemies," he wrote in the margins of his potions book. And though he turned spy, though he died protecting the son of the woman he loved, Snape never quite left the shadows. Even his classroom was a dungeon, his voice cold, his robes like mourning shrouds. He was haunted not just by what he had done, but by what he had known. The effect wasn't limited to those who practiced dark magic. Even witnessing it left scars. Harry Potter himself, though a beacon of resistance, carried the weight of dark memories. In the Triwizard Tournament, he watched Cedric Diggory die before his eyes. He saw the rebirth of Voldemort, felt the Cruciatus curse himself. "He's back," Harry whispered to Dumbledore, face pale, eyes wide, and from that moment on his innocence was gone. He dreamed of corridors, of pain, of death. The darkness had touched him, and though he resisted it, it followed him like a shadow. Hermione Granger, brilliant and brave, once wiped her parents' memories to keep them safe. She used Obliviate, a spell most wizards hesitate to use, especially on loved ones. Though she never spoke much about it, the pain was there, behind her fierce logic and fire. "It was necessary," she once told Ron, "but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." She had done something irreversible, not evil, not cruel, but still dark in its own way, magic that rewrote identity, that changed reality. Even Luna Lovegood, airy and light, had a moment of shattering clarity in Malfoy Manor when the Death Eaters held her captive. She never screamed, but afterward something changed in her. Her belief in the strange remained, but her laughter was softer, more distant. "There are things in the dark," she once told Neville quietly, "that are older than magic. You don't fight them. You endure them." Some say even Dumbledore wasn't untouched. He had once sought the Deathly Hallows, once dreamed of a world ruled by wizards. "I was drawn to power," he admitted to Harry in King's Cross, "but power always comes at a price." His hand, blackened by the Horcrux ring, was only the physical symbol of a far deeper wound, the realization that even the greatest among them could fall. He knew the dark well enough to warn others, because he had been tempted by it himself. There was also the case of Mary MacDonald, a lesser-known but promising Ravenclaw who joined the Department of Mysteries after graduation. Tasked with researching dark magical relics, she disappeared without a trace in 1984. Her last known assignment involved the retrieval of a cursed tapestry in Albania. The only message recovered was scrawled in blood on a fragment of her travel journal. "It's not just a spell, it sees you." The case was closed, the file sealed. But those who knew her claimed she had started talking in her sleep, murmuring in Parseltongue, a language she never studied. Even the ghosts of Hogwarts bear the touch. The bloody Baron, silent and sullen, murdered Helena Ravenclaw in a fit of rage, then turned the blade on himself. His chain-rattling silence is not just sorrow, it's penance. He doesn't speak because his voice still carries the echo of bloodshed. The castle keeps him not as a protector, but as a reminder. That rage, once unleashed, does not fade with time. It lingers. And then there are the Forbidden Forest's secrets. Centaurs refuse to speak of certain things that stir beneath the trees. remnants of ancient magic, sealed for centuries. "We do not meddle in the affairs of dark wizards," Firenze once told his class, "because the darkness remembers those who disturb it." There were whispers that Voldemort once performed rituals in those woods during his exile, and that the soils still reject sunlight in those places. Magic is memory. It clings, it whispers, it repeats. And dark magic, the kind born from fear, pain, and ambition, clings the hardest. It doesn't need to be cast again, it needs only to be remembered. And memory, as Dumbledore often said, is a curious thing. "In dreams, we enter a world that is entirely our own," he mused. "But for those who've known darkness, dreams become prisons, filled not with hope, but with the cost of survival. No, dark magic cannot be forgotten, not by the innocent, not by the guilty, and not by the world that bore witness. It lingers in the silence after a scream, in the coldness of a dungeon wall, in the way a wand trembles ever so slightly when held by someone who once used it for pain. The curse ends, but its echo remains. Number 20, Muggles can suffer from dark magic even without knowing it. It was a quiet Sunday morning in a sleepy Yorkshire village when the Elridge family first brought home the mirror. A magnificent relic from a distant past, it stood nearly 7 feet tall, its ebony frame etched with runes they assumed were Celtic, and its surface smooth as water. Margaret Elridge had found it at an antique market in London, tucked between boxes of dusty books and cracked china. The seller, a hunched man with parchment skin and watery eyes, warned her not to use it for reflection. "It's not meant for that," he whispered, as though ashamed of the item's true purpose. She laughed, thinking it a charming bit of theatrics, and paid in cash. Within days, things began to change. Her husband, Peter, a retired postman known for his sense of humour and love of crossword puzzles, grew quiet. He started forgetting simple words. Then he forgot his brother's name. Within a month, he barely spoke at all. Their son Thomas, a university student home for the summer, complained of hearing voices at night, whispers that seemed to come from the hallway, or worse, the mirror itself. Margaret's own dreams turned dark. She saw blood on her hands, though she never remembered how it got there. They assumed it was stress. They blamed the heat. But the mirror stood silently in the corner, feeding. Unbeknownst to the Elridges, they had brought home an object known in magical law enforcement circles as the Dreadglass. Its history was shrouded in secrecy, but rumours circulated through the Department of Magical Catastrophes that it had been created in the early 1600s by a warlock named Cassius Flint. Flint had been expelled from Durmstrang Institute for experimenting with mental possession and was later hunted down by the International Confederation of Wizards after 3 wizards lost their minds in his presence. The mirror, his final creation, was said to contain fragments of those minds, trapped like moths beneath glass. Cases like the Elridges are not isolated. Hidden beneath the polished image of peace between the magical and non-magical worlds lies a darker truth. Muggles, too, suffer from the echoes of wizarding war. Often they do not know it. Sometimes they never find out. The Ministry of Magic's Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, particularly the Muggle-Worthy Excuse Committee, exists precisely for this reason: to erase, to explain away, to smooth over. But their records, those that aren't classified, contain testimonies from Muggle families whose lives unravelled after contact with cursed artifacts, hexed places, or vengeful spirits. In one internal memorandum dated March 3, 1987, an Auror named Hestia Burke wrote, "It is my belief that the rising number of dementia cases in southeast Kent may be linked to an old wand core manufacturing site that was improperly sealed after the war. The site had belonged to Grigorovich's competitor, a wand-maker named Eliokhet, who dabbled in thestral tail hair and fragments of basilisk skin. Muggles who lived within a half-mile radius of the site reported hallucinations, paranoia, and loss of memory. The ministry quarantined the area under the guise of an industrial chemical spill. No one questioned it. Muggles rarely do. The insidious nature of dark magic is its subtlety. As Dumbledore once said, it is not only power that corrupts, but also the quiet whispers of power that lull us into complacency. While witches and wizards are trained to detect and defend against curses, Muggles walk blindly through the minefield. They have no wands, no defensive spells, no protective enchantments. The harm they suffer is often psychological, emotional, or inexplicable. It leaves no mark, yet it scars for life. The story of the Elridges came to the attention of the ministry when a neighbour, Amelia Rookwood, ironically the squib cousin of a known Death Eater, noticed Peter sitting in the garden, staring at the sky for hours. He had no food, no drink, no apparent awareness of time. She alerted a local squib contact in the Magical Surveillance Unit, who immediately recognized the symptoms. When Aurors arrived to retrieve the mirror, it fought them. It shattered the window with a scream. One witch vomited blood after glancing into its surface. Another forgot her own name for 6 hours. But what of the Muggles? The Elridges were taken to St. Mungo's under the guise of a rare psychological condition. Obliviators were dispatched to the neighbourhood, and in the final report the case was labelled as Category 4, Muggle exposure, memory unaffected, residual trauma likely. Margaret now lives alone in a care facility. Her son has not spoken since. The mirror was sealed in the Department of Mysteries, where it remains, unlabelled, behind 3 enchanted doors. There are dozens of such items. A jewellery box that sings lullabies that drive listeners to sleep for days, a hairbrush that pulls out not only hair but memory, a child's rocking horse once owned by Bellatrix Lestrange's niece that gallops on its own during the full moon. These items are sometimes stolen, sometimes sold, sometimes gifted in ignorance, and if they end up in Muggle hands, they often bring chaos. Harry Potter himself once acknowledged this unsettling truth during his first year, when he asked Hagrid, "But what if a Muggle finds something magic like a wand or a spellbook?" Hagrid had shrugged. "Most of the time it don't work right for them, but dark things they got a way of working no matter who's holding 'em. That, perhaps, is the most terrifying part. Dark magic does not discriminate. It does not care about bloodlines or heritage. It infects." Consider the case of the Claremont family in Wiltshire. They inherited an old estate after the death of a distant cousin, unaware that its cellar had been used during the First Wizarding War by followers of Gellert Grindelwald. The cellar held remnants, ashes of spell scrolls, potions that still hissed with residual magic. Over the course of 6 months, the family's youngest child, Lily, began speaking in dead languages. The family dog stopped barking and began howling at noon every day. Mirrors fogged over whenever anyone entered the dining room. Eventually, the father hanged himself. The ministry intervened, of course, but not before tragedy struck. No charges were filed. It was deemed an unfortunate oversight. What the ministry cannot control, however, are the whispers, the rumours, the haunted villages where people still speak of walking shadows, the burned-out homes whose residents vanished overnight. There is a place in northern Scotland known among magical folk as Hollowmere, unmarked on Muggle maps. Every attempt to repopulate it fails. Birds won't fly over it. The land refuses crops. And yet, to this day, Muggle hikers sometimes stumble into it, returning with strange dreams and odd behaviours. One man wrote a book of poetry in Latin despite never studying the language. The most disturbing accounts come not from wizards or aurors, but from Muggle doctors, priests and teachers. A nurse in Leeds once reported a patient who wept black tears. A priest in Prague recounted an exorcism where the afflicted spoke of a flame with a wand. In Romania, a schoolteacher described her class collectively fainting after a stranger passed by the window. Tall, pale, cloaked. Each child dreamed of the same thing that night, a serpent made of smoke, hissing their names. These incidents, catalogued in the restricted ministry dossier titled Muggle Interference Reports Class C and higher, suggest a deeper problem, that dark magic has ripple effects even beyond the intended target. The lingering residue of spells, especially those cast with powerful intent, clings to environments, to objects, to emotion itself. Muggles, with no means of defense, absorb it. They become carriers of a curse they never asked for. In a now suppressed interview, Kingsley Shacklebolt once said, "The greatest danger is not the spell, but the silence that follows it, because that silence allows it to grow unnoticed. And indeed, the silence is where the real damage occurs. The Elridges, the Claremonts, the countless unnamed, none of them knew what had infected their homes. They had no language to name the horror, they could only endure." Not all ministry workers agree with the policy of secrecy. A former obliviator named Susan Trigg published a short-lived Muggle conspiracy blog under the pseudonym S.T. Spellshield, hinting at a hidden war behind closed curtains. The blog was quickly taken down, but fragments still exist in internet archives. One post read, "Your bad dreams aren't always just dreams. Sometimes they're echoes." The blog was dismissed as delusion, but among certain wizarding circles, Susan Trigg's name became code for the truth no one dares admit, that the veil between magic and Muggle is thin and cracking. So the next time a mirror fogs over without reason, or a music box plays on its own, or a loved one forgets who you are overnight, perhaps it isn't age, or stress, or madness. Perhaps it's a whisper of something older, something darker, something that passed by and touched your life, even if you never saw it coming. The dark does not need to be loud to be dangerous. Sometimes it's in the silence. Sometimes it's already inside. Number 21. Some ancient families mastered darkness as an art. In the flickering candlelight of number 12, Grimmauld Place, the shadows whispered. Not all houses are homes, and not all traditions are meant to comfort. For the ancient House of Black, the heavy scent of secrets lingered in the velvet drapes and cursed heirlooms. Here, darkness was not shunned. It was celebrated, cultivated, passed like a sacred song through bloodlines that had long forgotten how to sing anything else. It was not merely about casting a curse or brewing a poison. No, the Black family understood darkness the way a maestro understands a violin, every note, every nuance, every vibration that makes the soul tremble. Dark magic was their symphony, and they played it with an elegance that terrified those who believed magic should serve the light. In Sirius Black's childhood, he had once reached for a silver-bound book in the drawing room, its cover pulsing like a living heart. "Don't touch that, boy," his mother had snapped, her voice dry as parchment. "That book bit your Uncle Alphard when he tried to read it aloud. He was never quite the same after." That was the Black family library, not a place of knowledge, but of rituals and wrath sealed in ancient ink. These books were not found in Hogwarts' restricted section. These were volumes so dangerous that even the ministry did not list them. Hidden grimoires bound in basilisk hide, spells so old they predated even Merlin's name. It is no wonder, then, that Bellatrix Lestrange, born a Black, wielded cruelty with the grace of a painter's brush. She did not learn her spells at Hogwarts, she inherited them. Her madness was not the result of Azkaban. It was the perfection of generations of shadow. When she hissed Crucio across the hall of the Department of Mysteries, it rang with a precision, an intimacy, a familiarity that bespoke not rage, but art, as if she were reciting poetry written by her ancestors. But the Blacks were not alone. The Gaunts, direct descendants of Salazar Slytherin himself, were perhaps even more fanatical in their reverence for the ancient and the forbidden. Marvolo Gaunt, father of Merope, grandfather of Tom Riddle, preserved his family's heirlooms not in admiration, but in obsession. A cracked ring with a hidden stone, a locket that whispered. These were not relics of wealth, They were containers of will, of darkness, of legacy. The Gaunts spoke Parseltongue as naturally as they breathed, not as a trick of talent, but as a birthright. When Dumbledore confronted Marvolo in the name of justice, he was not facing a simple, ignorant man, and he was standing before a patriarch of rot, a living remnant of a decayed bloodline that believed itself divine. "My daughter, marrying a Muggle," Marvolo had spat with the pride of a dying dynasty that had long forgotten the meaning of love. The Gaunts didn't marry for affection. They preserved blood like alchemists preserve gold. They distilled their power from ancient venom and dark pacts, not textbooks. Tom Riddle, born from this line, did not discover Horcruxes at Hogwarts. He perfected what his ancestors had hinted at. He took their whispered knowledge and sculpted it into something terrible. The Gaunt blood in him was a river of poison, and it flowed into everything he touched. Then there were the Rosiers, perhaps the most elegant of the Dark dynasties. Druella Rosier, mother of Bellatrix, Narcissa and Andromeda, was a woman of beauty and iron. Her family had always walked the line between sophistication and sin. The Rosiers were connoisseurs of pain, artists of vengeance. They dressed in silk, dined under enchanted chandeliers, and could cast a blood curse with the same ease with which they raised a glass. Evan Rosier, likely her cousin, fought in the First Wizarding War with such fury that even Mad-Eye Moody remembered him with a twisted sort of respect. "Took a chunk of my nose with him," Moody once said, and died laughing. That laugh was not madness, it was legacy. The Rosiers taught their children that to serve the Dark Lord was not submission, but triumph, a way to reclaim the world that had once belonged to the old blood. For them, Voldemort was not a dictator, he was a restorer. These families viewed dark magic not as a perversion, but as a craft. To them, a blood curse was no different from a family recipe. Their spellbooks were handwritten, not copied, passed down, not shared. Each curse bore the signature of the one who created it. There was pride in that. There was heritage. Even their homes reflected this belief. Grimmauld Place was filled with objects too sinister for even the room of requirement. The music box that induced a deadly sleep, the severed house elf heads mounted like hunting trophies, the tapestry that catalogued a millennium of pure blood supremacy. These were not decorations, they were declarations, proof of who they were and who they were not. It is tempting to think of these families as villains, but that would be too simple. They were something older, more terrifying. They were believers. They believed in the purity of magic, in the sacredness of blood, in the inheritance of power. To them, Dumbledore was a heretic, Hogwarts a desecrated cathedral, and the Ministry a circus of half-breeds. When Andromeda Black chose love over blood, she was burned from the tapestry, not metaphorically, but literally. "She is no sister of mine," Bellatrix had said. Andromeda's face was scorched from the fabric as if it had never existed. The family tree was not just genealogy, it was scripture, and to defy it was sacrilege. But darkness, like any tradition, has its paradoxes. Regulus Black, once a loyal Death Eater, turned against Voldemort in the end. He died trying to destroy a Horcrux, one of the very artifacts his family would have once revered. His last act was not one of rebellion, but of redemption. He died in shadows, but for the light. The paradox deepens with Draco Malfoy. While the Malfoys were not quite as old as the Gaunts, or as unhinged as the Rosiers, they too revered tradition. Lucius, with his walking stick wand and disdainful sneer, spoke the language of old power. Yet even he flinched when darkness bled beyond control. Narcissa in the forest lied to the Dark Lord himself, not for ideology, but for love. Her whisper to Harry, "Is Draco alive?" was not a betrayal. It was the fracture in a wall too long made of stone. The ancient families teach us that dark magic is not just spells or curses, it is belief. It is the echo of footsteps down marble halls. It is lullabies whispered in snake tongue. It is the weight of expectation and the suffocation of bloodlines too proud to bend. And in the end, that is what makes them so dangerous. Not their wands, but their certainty. For Bellatrix, it was never about Voldemort's orders, it was about ecstasy, about perfection. When she carved the word mudblood into Hermione's skin, she was not torturing, she was engraving, like an artist, like a priestess, like someone fulfilling a sacred ritual. "I want to see the light leave your eyes," she once told someone. And she meant it, not with hatred, but with awe. But not all legacies survive. The House of Gaunt is gone, the Rosiers are scattered, even the Blacks, once proud, now silent. Their houses crumble, their tapestries fade, yet their magic lingers, in hexes still whispered, in books still hidden, in the choices made by those born from their ashes, and perhaps that is the final truth. Darkness, when passed as inheritance, is not easily extinguished. It sleeps, it waits, and it remembers the hands that once held it with reverence. As Dumbledore once said, you place too much importance, and you always have done, on the so-called purity of blood. But these families never saw it as so-called. For them, it was the only truth that mattered, until it wasn't. And in that fall, there is the echo of tragedy. Number 22. Magical laws against dark arts don't always work. The laws of the magical world, majestic and ancient as they are, were never truly impenetrable. Especially when the shadows grew long, and even the noblest were forced to choose between the written word of the law and the unspoken vow of survival. This becomes painfully clear when one examines how the supposed unshakable laws against the dark arts wavered, bent, and sometimes outright shattered in times of fear. Consider the case of Auror John Dawlish, an elite ministry-trained wizard who was respected, well-groomed, and believed to be incorruptible. During the height of the Second Wizarding War, he and others like him were dispatched not merely to protect, but to strike first. Rumours whispered in the corridors of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement spoke of a raid on a suspected Death Eater hideout in Hampshire. Dawlish, pressed by urgency and armed with ministerial approval, used the Cruciatus Curse on a bound and unarmed suspect. The justification: he might have spoken faster. In a world that prided itself on justice, here was torture, sanctioned, authorized, and applauded. It's easy to believe the ministry was always the stalwart protector against darkness, yet in truth the ministry has always been reactive, not proactive. Dolores Umbridge, that pink-clad embodiment of authoritarian hypocrisy, once declared in the Wizengamot, progress for the sake of progress must be discouraged. But it was progress, specifically knowledge and understanding, that could have stopped the insidious spread of cursed objects through the wizarding world. While she was obsessed with parchment and protocol, a Horcrux hung from the neck of a student under her very nose. The trio knew it best, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. In the Deathly Hallows, when they infiltrated the Ministry under Polyjuice Potion, they passed through the corridors where the Muggle-born Registration Commission operated. And yet, not far from those offices, dark magic brewed under the surface. There were whispers of cursed ink, enchanted chains that bit into the wrists of prisoners, and wands stripped from innocent witches and wizards. Who, then, was the criminal? The one who disobeyed a broken law, or the one who obeyed it too well? Sirius Black, though himself stained by grief and revenge, once spat bitterly to Harry, "The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters." And that is precisely the flaw in the legalistic thinking of the ministry. They believed they could draw a clean line between light and dark, between good and evil, and legislate accordingly. But magic has never obeyed such boundaries. A cursed diary made it past the gates of Hogwarts and nearly killed a student. Was there a law that could have stopped that? No. Only understanding what that diary truly was could have made the difference. The Cursed Diary of Tom Riddle is perhaps the most damning example of magical law's ineffectiveness. No spell tracked it, no charm revealed it. It passed from Lucius Malfoy's hand into the cauldron of an 11-year-old girl, and the Ministry knew nothing. Only Dumbledore suspected, and even then too late. A law would not have protected Ginny Weasley. Only knowledge, only vigilance. And yet the Ministry's obsession with banning dark magic has always lacked subtlety. They ban curses, not curiosity. But dark magic rarely introduces itself with a grand entrance. It arrives quietly, in a mirror, in a locket, in a whisper. The mirror of Erised itself was a danger, not because of a spell, but because of an idea. Dumbledore himself admitted it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget. To live. What law could prohibit that kind of seduction? During the first rise of Voldemort, the Ministry's response was chaotic. Barty Crouch Sr. granted Aurors permission to use unforgivable curses. The idea was to fight fire with fire. Desperate times call for desperate measures, he declared. But what he unleashed was a generation of law enforcers who walked too close to the darkness. Some, like Mad-Eye Moody, kept their wits. Others, like Caradoc Dearborn, disappeared without a trace. Perhaps he crossed a line no one dared speak of. And it wasn't just the Ministry. Hogwarts itself, supposedly a sanctuary, had secret chambers and forbidden corridors. The Forbidden Forest, the Room of Requirement, the very Chamber of Secrets, all escaped the jurisdiction of law. When laws are drawn in ink and magic is written in blood and breath, it is little wonder which wins in the end. Remember the case of Marvolo Gaunt's ring, another Horcrux, hidden in the Gaunt shack, protected by curses ancient and wicked. Dumbledore, in his attempt to retrieve it, was mortally wounded. He was the greatest wizard of the age, and still he paid the price. Had any law ever even registered that object's existence? No. Had any Ministry official ever thought to investigate the ruins of an old family bound to Salazar Slytherin himself? No. Because the law is blind and the dark is patient. The law is even slower when the darkness wears a friendly face. Take Gellert Grindelwald, charming, articulate, persuasive. For years he amassed power in secret, travelling from Durmstrang to Europe, whispering about the greater good. The International Confederation of Wizards was oblivious for too long. His rise was not sudden. It was meticulous. By the time they labelled his magic illegal, his followers had already begun carving his symbols into the stones of Nurmengard. Magic, especially dark magic, does not obey legislation. It adapts, it disguises, a blood curse, a possession, a hex that triggers on touch. These cannot be policed like broom licenses. Even Arthur Weasley, ever curious and cautious, once said in the Chamber of Secrets, "Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain." But the law never asks such questions. It only measures wand usage and spell types, not sentience. In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry uses Sectum Sempra on Draco Malfoy, a spell found in a textbook unnamed and unmonitored, capable of causing horrific damage. Snape, furious but silent about the spell's origin, handles it in-house. Not one Ministry official ever knocks on the door to ask how such a curse reached a student. No investigation, no warning, because again, no law caught it, and no law ever could. When Hermione placed the jinx on the DA's parchment, causing Marietta Edgecombe's face to erupt in boils after she betrayed the group, no authority reprimanded her. Technically, she had cursed a fellow student, but the law remained silent. Was it because it was justified, or because it was invisible to their rules? That is the danger. Justice by silence, legality by ignorance. The tragedy of Amelia Bones still echoes through the annals of magical law. As head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, she stood for fairness. But even she, powerful and principled, was murdered by Voldemort himself. Her death was not just a loss of life, it was a loss of hope. If the law could not protect her, what hope was there for the common witch? Even Azkaban, the feared island prison, is built more on terror than justice. Guarded by dementors, creatures that feed on despair. The punishment there is not merely loss of freedom, but loss of the soul. And yet during both wars, innocent people like Sirius Black were sent there without trial. Law twisted by fear becomes no different than law twisted by evil. Rufus Scrimgeour, when he replaced Fudge, tried to give the illusion of strength. But as Dumbledore pointedly told Harry, "You are blinded by the love of the office." Scrimgeour enforced appearances, not security. He wanted Harry to become a symbol for the Ministry's cause, not truth, not understanding. The law became theatre, and Voldemort played the audience like a maestro. The only true defense against the dark arts has never been a law. It has always been knowledge, from Dumbledore's careful mentorship of Harry to Hermione's compulsive research, to the warnings hidden in books like Magical Me, however ridiculous Lockhart may be. Understanding magic has always offered more safety than decrees. The first step to resisting a curse is recognizing it. In the final battle at Hogwarts, there were no court orders, no warrants, just choices. Minerva McGonagall did not wait for authorization to defend her school. Molly Weasley did not consult procedure before dueling Bellatrix Lestrange. Harry did not sign legal forms before walking into the forest to face death. In those moments, the only law that mattered was love. So when we hear a ministry official proclaim that unforgivable curses are outlawed, let us not be lulled into a false sense of safety, because the same curse that corrupted Barty Crouch Jr. under Polyjuice can lie in the heart of a child's storybook. The same darkness that crept into the corridors of Hogwarts can curl beneath the bed of any unsuspecting student. In truth, the magical world does not need more laws. It needs more guardians of knowledge, people like Dumbledore, like Hermione, like Harry. People who understand that protection does not come from prohibition. As Dumbledore once said, it is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. And no law, however noble, can make those choices for us. Number 23, not all dark wizards were evil. The darkness flickered at the edge of the room like a living thing, and Adrian Arcturus Flynn watched it calmly. He had never feared the shadows. In fact, he had once said, "Magic does not come in shades of morality. Only the hands that wield it do." That sentence, recorded in a faded journal now buried somewhere in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, is all that remains of a man whose legacy was swallowed by silence. And yet his story raises a question too dangerous to answer. Was he a dark wizard, or simply misunderstood? In 1853, before magical anesthetics were known to exist, a young Adrian Flynn found himself serving as a junior Medewitch at St. Mungo's. He was brilliant, methodical, and quiet. He observed what others missed. When patients came in with cursed wounds or internal magical ruptures, Adrian noticed how they would writhe and scream, not from pain alone, but from fear. Fear gripped the mind and magnified agony. "If I can quiet the mind," he wrote, "perhaps I can quiet the pain." And so he turned to a spell forbidden in polite wizarding society, the Imperious Curse. Unforgivable, they called it, one of the three. But Adrian didn't use it to control or enslave. He cast it gently, almost reverently, placing terrified patients into a state of serene obedience before difficult procedures. "They smiled at me as I operated," he noted in a personal letter to healer Beatrice Roll. "Some whispered thank you, some wept, but with relief." Roll, though sympathetic, warned him to stop. "You know they'll never understand, Adrian," she told him. "They see only the tool, not the hand." She was right. When a patient died during surgery, a boy of 7 with a malformed lung, it wasn't the curse that failed, but a severed artery. Still, the ministry opened an investigation. The Daily Prophet ran a series of sensational headlines. "Dark Doctor at St. Mungo's," unforgivable acts in our hospitals. The wizarding public panicked. It didn't matter that his other patients had survived. Adrian was expelled from the Society of Magical Physicians within the week. What followed was a quiet disgrace. Flynn moved to a cottage near Ottery St. Catchpole and lived alone, reading, writing, and experimenting in secret. Some say he began working on a formula to separate the conscious mind from pain altogether, a precursor to modern magical anesthesia. Others say he went mad, talking to shadows and scribbling equations on the walls. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. What we do know is that 20 years later, Aura Cassius Muldoon would use a modified Imperius spell to subdue the mass murderer Malcolm Bain during a hostage crisis in Nocturna. Ali. Muldoon, in his official report, noted, "The spell used was based on an old method devised by a controversial healer named Flynn. It calmed the suspect without injury. I owe him thanks." But Flynn never knew. He had died by then, alone and forgotten. The story of Adrian Flynn is only one piece in a puzzle that refuses to fit within the neat moral binaries we learn as children. Hogwarts teaches the unforgivable curses as sacrosanct boundaries never to be crossed. The books say the same. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Moody, Barty Crouch Jr., disguised, of course, shows the class the curses and says, "Now, if there's one thing you can be sure of, it's that these are not taught lightly." But he never says they're inherently evil. The implication lies in their potential for abuse. Yet what if that potential was restrained, focused, purified? Consider another case, a witch named Lysandra Vole. In 1721 she used the Cruciatus curse, not to inflict pain, but to extract a deadly parasite known as a mind leech from the spinal cord of her husband, who had acquired it during an expedition in the Forbidden Forest. The mind leech bonded with the nervous system and could not be physically removed, but pain could drive it out, extreme, unbearable pain. With his consent, she used the curse, focusing it carefully, modulating the intensity, directing it at the creature. The parasite fled. Her husband lived. But Lysandra was arrested, fined, and barred from practicing magic for 10 years. Even today, her story is excluded from the historical compendium of magical medicine. Her great-great-grandson, Reginald Vole, once wrote, "My ancestor broke a rule to save a life. The ministry broke her spirit to preserve an illusion of moral certainty." It is this illusion, this belief that certain spells carry a moral weight independent of their use, that fuels fear rather than understanding. And it is precisely this illusion that Tom Riddle manipulated so well. He painted himself as a scholar first, a philosopher of magic. "There is no good and evil," he told Slughorn in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. "There is only power, and those too weak to seek it." But Voldemort failed because he saw only power. He lacked the essential wisdom of restraint. Flynn had it. Lysandra had. They sought not power, but purpose. Even among Death Eaters, not all were uniformly wicked. Severus Snape, for example, operated in the deepest darkness to serve a singular light. "He was a brave man," said Harry Potter in the Deathly Hallows. "He was the bravest man I ever knew." Snape's knowledge of dark arts was vast. He invented curses, he mastered poisons, yet he used them to shield a boy, to atone for a girl. In the end, he did what Dumbledore could not. He embraced the shadows to preserve the light. What does this say about the very nature of dark magic? Is it inherently corrupting, or is it like fire, dangerous when uncontrolled, life-saving when tamed? In the Half-Blood Prince, we learn that Dumbledore himself dabbled in forbidden spells during his youth. "I too sought power," he admitted to Harry. "I too desired to change the world." His sister, Ariana, suffered for his ambition. It was a lesson that shaped the rest of his life. He feared dark magic because he understood its seductive logic, not because it was evil, but because it whispered answers too easily. But to label all users of dark spells as monsters is a disservice to history. During the 1890 Goblin rebellions, the wizard militia in Cornwall employed the use of blood-binding hexes to ensure that captured hostiles would not be executed. It was a compromise, horrifying, yes, but more merciful than decapitation. The ministry quietly sanctioned it, then destroyed the documents years later. But the old Auror Elphias Thatch kept a diary, now stored at the Department of Mysteries. In it he writes, "There were moments I hated myself for the spells I used, but never for the reasons they think. I hated myself because they worked." We are taught that spells have intrinsic value. Lumos is good, Avada Kedavra is evil, but spells are language, and language depends on context. The incantation Imperio is not a sentence, it is a word. It needs a sentence, it needs an author, it needs meaning. And therein lies the problem. When institutions cannot police meaning, they police the word. In 1934, the Wizarding Court of France ruled against a young charms professor named Celeste Morin, who had been caught using a modified form of the Sectum Sempra curse to remove malignant growths from the bones of werewolves. The spell, originally designed to maim, had been reversed, its destructive intent re-engineered. She had successfully cured 17 patients, but the court said, "A curse cannot be healed. To use it is to become it." She lost her wand license. Her patients lost their protector. Flim would have understood. He believed that darkness was not the absence of light, but a form of illumination for those willing to look. His notes suggest he was working on a project he called Ethical Maleficia, a compendium of so-called dark spells used for noble ends. He never published it. The manuscript was seized after his death. Rumors claim it still exists, guarded in the Department of Mysteries, locked behind wards too old to name. And yet we see echoes of his philosophy in today's world. The Aura Division in 1998 began quietly training recruits in non-lethal dark spell techniques to subdue Death Eaters without killing. They called it Counter Curse Protocol, but the roots go deeper, perhaps to Flim, perhaps to Vole, perhaps to the unspoken truth that some darkness is not born from malice but from necessity. Harry Potter himself used Cruciatus. He cast it on Amicus Carrow in Deathly Hallows after Carrow spat in Professor McGonagall's face. "You shouldn't have done that," Harry said, and the spell left his lips like instinct. Was it revenge? Was it justice? Was it evil? The books do not say. The moment hangs unresolved like so many others. Perhaps that is J.K. Rowling's most subtle genius, her refusal to paint the magical world in absolute black and white. So we return to the question, what makes magic dark? Its power or its purpose? The answer may never be comfortable because it demands we trust not the wand but the wizard, and wizards, like all people, are complicated. In a world where shadows move and spells whisper temptation, perhaps morality lies not in what we cast, but in why we cast it. Adrian Flim, Lysandra Vole, Severus Snape, they were not saints, but neither were they monsters. They were wanderers in the grey, and sometimes it is in the grey that we find the greatest truths. Let the ministry continue to ban words. Let Hogwarts teach boundaries, but let us not forget that even darkness can hold a kind of mercy, and those who walk through it carefully and with conscience may yet save lives where the light dares not go. Number 24. Some spells cannot be learned without inner darkness. Not all magic yields to knowledge. Some spells refuse to obey even the most brilliant minds. It does not matter how precisely a wizard flicks their wand, nor how clearly they pronounce the incantation. These spells demand something far deeper, something visceral, often ugly, an internal echo of malice, a shadow in the soul. This truth became tragically clear in the dungeons of Malfoy Manor. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, found herself face to face with Bellatrix Lestrange. Tortured with the Cruciatus curse, Hermione screamed in agony while Ron and Harry listened helplessly from the cell below. Bellatrix didn't just cast the curse, she relished it. Her wand moved as though in dance, her face alight with rapture. To her, pain was poetry, and that perhaps is what made the curse so effective. The unforgivable curses are not just named for the severity of their effect, but for the emotional truth they require. When Harry tried to cast the Cruciatus curse on Bellatrix after she killed Sirius, it barely tickled her. She laughed. "You need to mean it, Potter," she screamed. "You need to really want to cause pain to enjoy it. Righteous anger won't hurt me for long." That was Order of the Phoenix. And in that moment, something vital about dark magic was revealed. It is not simply a spell. It is a confession. This is why young, angry Draco Malfoy, despite his vanity and pride, could not kill Albus Dumbledore. Even with the Elder Wand aimed and the room silent, Draco faltered. His fear overwhelmed his ambition. Draco lowered his wand. His hand was shaking badly. He had the training, he had the opportunity, but he lacked the darkness. The intent was missing, and without it, the curse could not live. Conversely, when Severus Snape stepped forward and cast the killing curse, it was clean, silent, and devastating. Avada Kedavra. No flash, no scream, just Dumbledore's body arcing over the battlements. And yet Snape's act was layered in complexity. He did not cast it out of hatred, but duty, out of an oath to a woman long dead. But he was capable of such magic because he knew darkness intimately. He had lived in it for years, disguised behind sarcasm and bitterness. Hermione, for all her brilliance, could not wield such magic. During the Battle of Hogwarts, she defended with precision, shielded with grace, but never attacked with true ferocity. Her soul, anchored in logic and empathy, resisted the pull of cruelty. She might have known the words Crucio, Imperio, Avada Kedavra, but she never tried them, or if she did, they likely fizzled out, impotent against the purity of her intentions. Bellatrix Lestrange, by contrast, was born to destroy. She didn't study dark magic, she embodied it. Even her laughter sounded cursed, high-pitched, cracked, unhinged. In the Department of Mysteries, she killed Sirius Black with a flick, then twirled away, singing. "I killed Sirius Black! I killed Sirius Black!" she taunted Harry, dancing like a child with a secret. Her power was not in the wand. It was in her soul, corrupted, twisted, hungry for dominance, and the Ministry of Magic tried to regulate the use of such spells, labeling them unforgivable. But the truth is more frightening. You cannot accidentally use them. You cannot pick up a wand and, through clumsy enthusiasm, curse someone's soul. These spells are only born when something inside you turns to rot. Consider Amicus Carrow, the Death Eater who taught the dark arts at Hogwarts under Snape's headmastership. He did not teach theory. He forced students to practice, to harm others, but only a handful succeeded. Others, even under threat of punishment, failed to cast the curses. One Hufflepuff boy, according to Neville Longbottom, broke down in tears trying to use the Cruciatus curse. He couldn't do it. Carrow gave him detention instead, said he was useless. But perhaps that boy was simply still whole. Neville himself, quiet, underestimated, eventually managed to use deadly force. He beheaded Nagini, Voldemort's final Horcrux, with the sword of Gryffindor, but that was steel, not magic. Even in his rage, Neville never turned to unforgivable spells. He, like Hermione, had something inside that refused to bend. There is a quiet kind of strength in that, a refusal to be broken. Harry, too, skirted the edge. In Half-Blood Prince, he used the spell Sectum Sempra on Draco, a curse he found scribbled in the margins of the Half-Blood Prince's textbook. The result was horrifying. Blood erupted from Draco's chest, painting the bathroom tiles in crimson arcs. Harry had not meant to kill, but the magic obeyed him anyway. Why? Because for one fleeting second he wanted to hurt. He was humiliated, furious, and desperate. That was enough. The spell fed on it. When Snape found them, he healed Draco with practiced movements. "There may be a great deal of dark magic in the world," he told Harry later, "but you will find it most effective only when you are willing to give something up in return." That something, though never named, is always the same, a part of your humanity. Dolores Umbridge, the prim, toad-like figure in pink cardigans, never used the unforgivable curses, but her use of magic was no less cruel. She crafted quills that etched words into skin. She rewrote truths with laws. Her darkness was bureaucratic, cold, calculated, smug. She smiled as she punished. It is a different form of darkness, no less potent. Tom Riddle, before he became Voldemort, was already experimenting with such magic. As a boy at the orphanage, he terrified others without touching them. "I can make them hurt if I want to," he whispered to Dumbledore. That desire, not to defend, not to protect, but to control, was the seed. Years later, when he split his soul into 7 pieces, he used murder as a scalpel. The curses he invented, from the lightning-fast killing curse to the soul-shattering Horcrux ritual, were not textbook spells. They were born of obsession. Dark magic is not passed down like recipes. It is discovered like disease, through contact, through experimentation, through hunger. There is no good and evil, Voldemort once said, only power, and those too weak to seek it. That was the creed he lived by. It is the belief that strips spells of morality and turns them into weapons. Fenrir Greyback, the werewolf who delighted in biting children, used no incantations. His magic was of the blood. But even he understood the primal rule. Cruelty, when indulged, becomes its own form of power. He aligned with Voldemort not for ideology, but for the freedom to indulge. The Dark Lord recognized that. He welcomed monsters, not just wizards. Regulus Black, Sirius's younger brother, once believed in Voldemort's purity ideals. He joined the Death Eaters young, eager. But when he learned what Horcruxes were, the price of such magic, he turned away. "I'm going to destroy it," he told Kreacher the elf. "It has to be done." That one act of defiance, stealing the locket, cost him his life. But it proved that the soul, once touched by darkness, can still reach for the light. The Room of Requirement during the final year at Hogwarts became a sanctuary. Students fled there to escape the Carrows and their forced lessons. Inside, they whispered of spells they refused to use, even as danger grew. Dean Thomas reportedly said, "None. I'd rather be killed than torture someone for practice." That kind of resistance is rare. It is also powerful. For every wizard who succumbs, either like Peter Pettigrew, who murdered for favor, there are those who resist, even when it costs them. Pettigrew's hand, crafted by Voldemort, eventually killed him. "You owe me," Harry reminded him, and in that moment of hesitation, that flicker of conscience, the hand turned against its master, because even dark magic punishes doubt. Ultimately, magic is not neutral, it remembers. A wand, though made of wood, learns from its wielder. The Elder Wand served many masters, but it responded best to those who did not fear death. The same could be said for the darkest spells. They require a certain surrender, not of technique, but of soul. When the final battle raged at Hogwarts, curses flew like arrows, Death Eaters fell, students bled, but only a few wielded the unforgivable curses with consistency. They were not always the most talented, but they were always the most broken. Some spells cannot be learned through books. They cannot be taught in classrooms. They require something else entirely, a willingness to destroy, to dominate, to abandon all mercy. This is why Bellatrix laughed, why Voldemort whispered, why Harry, even in his worst moments, could never fully embrace the darkness, because some spells don't just hurt the enemy, they leave marks on the caster, and those marks, though invisible, never fade. Number 25. Some books have a dark life of their own. The restricted section of the Hogwarts library holds many secrets. Some whisper when no one's near. Others remain perfectly silent, but never still. There is a particular scent in the air between those shelves, aged parchment, dust, something acrid and faintly sweet like decaying flowers. But what unnerves most visitors isn't the quiet or the smell. It's the feeling that something is watching, and not just watching, waiting. Madam Pince, the school's ever-watchful librarian, once declared, "The books in that section aren't just about dark magic. Some are dark magic." Few students took her literally until they encountered the books themselves. Beneath thick chains, hex locks, and ink-smeared warnings, some volumes lie coiled like sleeping serpents. Others hum gently, their covers trembling. And then there are books like The Chronicles of the Black Oracle, which do not rest. They whisper, they weep, they call. Many students over the centuries have dared to test the limits of the restricted section, hoping for forbidden knowledge or bragging rights. In 1949, a clever Ravenclaw by the name of Edric Thorne signed out a volume simply marked Tenebris Sapientia. According to records kept by the library, he returned it 3 days later. But by then, Edric had changed. His classmates recounted how he stopped sleeping, stared through people as though looking past the veil of this world, and murmured to himself in languages no one understood. Professor Flitwick, who was still a student at the time, remembered Edric's eyes as hollow pools, like he was listening to something only he could hear. It was The Chronicles of the Black Oracle, however, that earned the darkest reputation of them all. Bound in charred dragon hide and sealed with 3 runes of unknown origin, the book is said to have been written by a seer, driven mad by his own prophecies. The ink inside bleeds, the text shifts, and the pages, when flipped, sigh as though breathing. The last known student to handle it without supervision was a 5th year named Livia Ashcombe. Within days, she was caught scribbling ancient runes on the walls of the astronomy tower, her eyes glazed over. She vanished 1 week later. Professor Sinistra recalled finding the runes during her morning observations. They weren't in any known magical language. When I tried to erase them, my wand sparked blue flames. It was like the stone didn't want to forget. Livia was never found. Her room remained untouched, save for a copy of the Black Oracle on her desk, closed but warm to the touch. Headmaster Dippet had the book sealed in a lead-lined box and returned to the restricted section with a protective enchantment woven personally by Albus Dumbledore. Some books, scholars argue, are vessels. Like Pensieves or cursed objects, they absorb the essence of their creator. If the creator was mad, so the book becomes madness. If the creator was cruel, the book learns cruelty. And if the creator dealt in the deepest arts of shadow and blood, then the book, over time, begins to live, not in the sense of motion or breath, but in intent, in presence, as if its soul, fragmented or otherwise, slumbers just beneath the parchment. There are even stories, hardly believed yet never debunked, of books that grow, not in size but in intelligence, that change their content depending on who opens them. A curious second year might see harmless riddles, a cunning Slytherin might find forbidden rituals, a desperate Gryffindor could read confessions, warnings, or even bargains. "Books like that," said Professor Binns once, during a rare, unscripted moment, "are like mirrors, only crueler. They show you not what you are, but what you might become." Hogwarts, being an ancient place with roots deeper than its stone foundations, has never fully purged its library of such books. Dumbledore believed in balance, light and dark both, and so long as the books remained sealed and guarded, he allowed them to stay. Not everyone agreed. During Dolores Umbridge's infamous reign as High Inquisitor, she tried to destroy several of the darker volumes. According to Madam Pince's own notes, 2 of the books hissed when touched. 1 bit her. Another strange case involved a book called Atra Manuscripts. It was discovered inside a bricked-off corridor behind the potions classroom, wrapped in chains and velvet. The book had no author, no title on the spine. But when opened, it revealed spells for manipulating memory, twisting fate, and crafting illusions that could drive someone mad. One passage, when read aloud, made 3 candles burst into green flame and the reader's nose bleed for an hour. The book now lies in a glass case, never to be opened again. A warning etched in gold across the lid reads, "Some knowledge is not meant for minds with bones." Even students as brilliant as Hermione Granger treated the restricted section with a rare kind of respect. When she, Harry, and Ron used a disillusionment charm to sneak past Pince in their first year, they ended up face to face with a book that screamed, not metaphorically, literally. A blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the library and nearly summoned Filch. Hermione later admitted, "Some of those books, they don't want to be read, not by us, maybe not by anyone." But what makes such books so dangerous is not just the content, it's the interaction. One book, The Compendium of Shadowed Thought, reportedly caused a student to experience false memories of crimes he never committed. Another, Vox Obscura, whispers directly into the reader's ear, speaking not words but impulses. A Ravenclaw prefect once tried to steal it, only to be found an hour later trying to vanish her own shadow with a severing charm. She never explained why. The books seem to thrive on attention, especially fear. Professor Snape, though not a superstitious man, ordered several of these books warded with anti-possession spells. He believed they could influence potion making through subtle suggestion, nudging the brewer toward more dangerous concoctions. "There is a difference," he once told a sixth year, "between brewing with knowledge and brewing with whispers in your ear." One of the oldest tomes, Noctis Scriptura, predates the school itself. Bound in goblin-forged iron and leathered from an unknown beast, it is said to have belonged to a cult of seers who gouged out their own eyes to gain visions from the void. The book does not open easily. It requires blood, willingly given, and once opened, shows not writing but moving images, visions tailored to the reader's deepest fears or desires. Headmistress McGonagall reportedly had the book sealed beneath a stone slab in the deepest corner of the library with a sign, "This book does not teach, it consumes." It was Professor Dumbledore who once remarked to a young Auror in training that the most dangerous books are not those that teach how to kill, but those that make you want to. That line was later quoted in the Auror's Primer as a warning against seductive knowledge. Indeed, seductive is the right word. Some books hum when you near them. Some tremble in delight when touched. One, the Siren Grimoire, sings to those who stand too long before it. 3 students were hospitalized after spending a night outside its locked cabinet, convinced they were waiting for the moon to open. And what of the living books? Yes, there are whispers of books that bite, shriek, or fly, but the worst are the ones that think. Liber Umbrae, a text older than most known magical scripts, is said to rearrange itself each full moon. Students who tried to copy its pages found their hands writing different words than intended, sometimes entire essays in languages they didn't know. A note found inside read, "I am not what I was. You are not who you think." It isn't just students who fall under the spell of these tomes. A defense against the dark arts professor in 1892 vanished after requesting the Serpent Tongue Codex. The only trace left behind was a single sentence etched into his desk. "The book sees me now." His replacement refused to even enter the restricted section. "There are things," she said, "that should never be read, only buried. And yet buried things don't always stay buried." Every few decades, a book long thought destroyed reappears, sometimes in the hands of a new student, sometimes sitting silently on a shelf where it wasn't before. One such tome, the ash-wrought Lexicon, was burned under Dumbledore's orders in 1972. It reappeared in 1991, unharmed, with a note inside, "Your fire is not strong enough." What makes these books so chilling is their intent. They are not simply records, they are not neutral, they are active participants in the world around them. They sense, they hunger, and they remember. One former librarian claimed that the Mirror Quill Journal, a diary bound in blue velvet and silver trim, could respond to written questions. When asked its name, it wrote, "I was once a girl." The librarian sealed it immediately. Even the Ministry of Magic acknowledges the danger. The Department of Mysteries once attempted to catalogue such volumes under the Codex Umbra initiative. Most of the assigned unspeakables refused to finish the task. One, a witch named Thalia Greaves, left a single memo. Some books do not want to be known. They want to be obeyed. At Hogwarts, these books are kept under spell and lock, but locks rust, spells weaken, and curiosity never dies. The library's restricted section remains a place of dread and wonder, a sanctuary for words that should never be read, and thoughts that should never be thought. And, somewhere, amid the chains and the shadows, the Black Oracle still breathes. Whispers say it waits. Not for just any reader, but for the right one. One who will not fear it. One who will understand, or one who will simply listen. Number 26. Dark amulets can awaken fear and submission. They say there are objects in the wizarding world so saturated with dark intent that they seem to hum with malevolence. Not all magic is meant to dazzle or protect. Some was created for control, and the darkest amulets ever forged were not made to shield their bearers, but to crush the spirit of those who dared to resist. In a dusty corner of the restricted section of the Hogwarts Library, among the oldest and most closely guarded volumes, lies a tattered manuscript titled Artifacts of the Hollow Age. Few have seen it. Fewer still understand the language in which it was written, an archaic dialect of Old Runic, tainted by infernal modifications. One passage speaks of a relic long forgotten by most of the magical community, the Morsmord Ring, or as the Whispers called it in the dark. Age, Cleet Dreadfang, the Ring of Hopeless Fire. It is said the ring was forged in the 12th century by a warlock named Thales Blackmore, an ancestor of the more infamous Sirius Black. Thales was not mad, at least not at first. He was a scholar of fear, obsessed with what he called the pliability of the human will when exposed to imminent loss. The ring he created was not cursed in the traditional sense. It did not spread disease or pain. Instead, it exhaled despair. An account by a ministry scribe in 1213 described an encounter with the ring in the village of Dunmore. The villagers, the report reads, spoke of a man cloaked in raven feathers who arrived with no wand, no army, only a ring upon his finger. The sky darkened with his breath. Children stopped crying, not out of peace, but because they had forgotten how. The entire village surrendered to Thales Blackmore without a spell cast. He held them hostage not with violence, but with the sense that fighting back was useless. Dark amulets, unlike enchanted jewelry made for love or good fortune, are often infused with intent, capitalized for a reason. The intent is not merely the caster's mood at the time of creation, but a kind of sentient force developed through rituals so ancient they predate the International Statute of Secrecy by centuries. The Morsmord Ring was never documented in official Hogwarts curricula, but its essence echoes in warnings given by Dumbledore himself. In Half-Blood Prince, when speaking of Horcruxes, Dumbledore warned, "There is a room in the Department of Mysteries that is kept locked at all times. It contains a force that is at once more wonderful and more terrible than death, than human intelligence, than forces of nature." Though he was referring to love, the same principle applies inversely to amulets like the Morsmord Ring. They weaponize the mind's fragility, twist perception, and remove all hope. During Voldemort's rise, there were rumors that the Dark Lord attempted to recreate such an object. While he favored Horcruxes for immortality, several Death Eaters were spotted wearing strange amulets, none more fearsome than the thorn collar of Gaius, which was discovered in the possession of Bellatrix Lestrange during her stay at Azkaban. This collar, made of blackened iron, would tighten whenever the wearer felt doubt. It was a training tool, fear as reinforcement, shame as magic. But perhaps the most terrifying thing about these amulets is not their power, it's their silence. They do not scream when worn, they do not glow with cursed fire. They sit cold and patient, feeding. Arthur Shacklebolt, a cousin of Kingsley Shacklebolt and a former unspeakable, once claimed in his private notes, "The amulet does not force you to obey, it makes you want to obey. You stop questioning, you stop resisting, you kneel because standing no longer feels like a choice." In 1467, a small coastal settlement known as Bramblewick was found abandoned. There were no signs of struggle, no dark marks in the sky. Only a single statue remained at the village centre, a carved figure of a man with a ring on his finger and empty eyes. Ministry investigators found carvings on the houses reading, "We are nothing." The legend grew that the Morsmorda ring had passed through, and every soul had faded into quiet subservience. No bodies were ever found. Some believe the Morsmorda ring was destroyed in the 16th century by a young witch named Eleanora Greaves, who found it buried in the forest near her estate. She was an apprentice of the great healer Bartholomew Kent, and her journals, preserved in fragments at the Museum of Magical Artifacts, describe how the ring wept black smoke when touched, whispering the end of all things. She sealed it in a circle of enchanted salt and surrounded it with phoenix feathers, which caught fire spontaneously when the ring tried to influence her. And yet, a shadow of it remains. Not all amulets bear such infamous names. Some hide in plain sight. In Knockturn Alley, one can still find shops that sell charms of influence. These are not regulated by the ministry, at least not openly. But Aura Tonks once remarked to Harry in Order of the Phoenix, "The things you can find down Knockturn, it's not all skeleton hands and blood ink. Some of it's quieter, much more dangerous." One such item, purchased by Lucius Malfoy before the war, was later found in Draco's belongings after the fall of Voldemort. It resembled a silver brooch, shaped like a serpent coiling around a tear. When worn, it is said to emit a subtle pulse that heightens feelings of inadequacy in those nearby. Draco's fellow students described moments in the Great Hall where they felt smaller around him, less significant, even without a word exchanged. How many decisions in wizarding history were truly free, and how many were made under the weight of such invisible influence? There is a theory among unspeakables that the creation of these dark amulets stems from a misunderstood branch of wand lore. While wands channel magic, amulets store emotion. Anger, despair, submission. These are energy forms, and when captured correctly, they can be infused into stone, silver, or bone. The longer an amulet remains active, the more potent its field becomes. Griselda March, a Ravenclaw researcher, who vanished mysteriously in 1803, once proposed that certain amulets were built not by individual wizards, but by collective suffering. Her last thesis, On the Convergence of Pain and Power, argued that sites of historical tragedy could give birth to magical relics of their own volition. "When enough voices scream in silence," she wrote, "something listens, and sometimes it leaves a gift behind." There is a chilling story from the 1940s, long dismissed as rumour, about a travelling peddler who offered magical trinkets in post-war wizarding towns. His most expensive item was a pendant known as the Listener's Eye. It was oval-shaped obsidian black and unnervingly warm to the touch. Buyers claimed it allowed them to sense dishonesty, useful in times of great distrust. But the more they used it, the less they trusted anyone at all. Paranoia bloomed, and entire families broke apart. Years later, when the pendant was recovered, a single word was etched inside its casing: Silencio. There is little doubt among modern magical historians that dark amulets will resurface again. Evil, after all, does not sleep, it waits, and as long as fear exists in the hearts of men and women, there will be those who seek to turn that fear into obedience. The ministry has long attempted to trace the bloodlines and personal vaults of known dark families, but as Kingsley Shacklebolt once said in a closed Wizengamot session, "It's not the legacy of such objects that makes them dangerous, it's the people still willing to wear them." The forbidden vaults beneath Gringotts hold many relics too dangerous to destroy. Some whisper through enchanted locks, calling to the greedy and the weak. Curse breakers speak of dreams they suffer after working near such items, dreams where they kneel before shadowed figures, their mouths dry and voices gone. The final paragraph of Artifacts of the Hollow Age is smudged and near illegible, but one sentence remains. It is not the amulet that holds the power, it is the surrender we offer it. And perhaps that is the most frightening truth of all. Number 27. Some spells feed on pain, not just others, but your own. They say not all pain is punishment. In some corners of the magical world, it is currency. There exists a category of spells in the realm of dark magic that defies ordinary classification. These are not simple incantations cast with a flick of the wand and a confident tongue. They are rituals, primitive, ancient, and hungry. Hungry for agony, for heartbreak, for the bleeding soul of the very wizard who dares to summon them. And unlike the unforgivables, which demand cruelty and intent, these spells demand sacrifice, not of life, but of self. One of the most dreaded among them is Murmuris Noctem, the whisper of the night. It is said that this spell, forbidden even in the oldest editions of the Dark Arts, a guide to self-protection, can unravel the minds of every soul within its radius, but only if the caster has truly suffered a wound that magic cannot heal. Emotional devastation is the fuel, grief the ignition. The most infamous recorded use of Murmuris Noctem was by a former Death Eater named Adral Kor. A name barely whispered even among those who served Voldemort, Kor was once a scholar of dark runes at Durmstrang before he was seduced by the promise of immortal legacy. After the fall of the Dark Lord, Kor disappeared until the tragedy that broke him surfaced in Ministry records. In 2004, the Aura outpost in Skye was destroyed in a single night, not by flames, not by curses, but by silence. 31 Auras were found lying in their quarters, not dead, but vacant. Their minds hollowed out, their eyes open but forever unseeing. The walls bore no signs of struggle. No one heard a sound. The Department of Mysteries took over the investigation. Rumours swirled, but the truth was buried deep until one unsigned parchment leaked into the hands of the Daily Prophet. On it, scrawled in desperate ink, was a single sentence. She died, and I had nothing left to lose. Let them share my silence. The writer was later identified as Adral Kor. His wife, Kayla, had been killed in a crossfire between rogue snatchers and auras. Her body never recovered. Kayla had been a muggle, a gentle woman who loved magical poetry and had a habit of humming lullabies in Gaelic. Her death broke something ancient in Kor, something he had kept buried beneath layers of control and detachment. Those who studied the incident speak of the spell's peculiar aftermath. The nearby forest lost its birdsong. Owls no longer flew over the area. Even magic itself warped for a time. Charms misfired. Time-turners stopped. It was as though the spell had drained not just minds but the natural magic of the land and Kor. He was found 2 weeks later on a cliff near the ruins, alive but mute. His tongue untouched, his mind whole, but he could no longer speak. The healer who examined him at St. Mungo's, Dorothea Crowell, noted in her report, "He communicates through writing, but his hand trembles with every word. He smiles when shown photos of Kayla, and weeps when left alone. Whatever he cast, it took more than his voice. It took a piece of his soul." In the shadows of this tale lie whispers of other such spells, spells that feed not only on hatred, but on raw pain. One such curse is Lacrimosa Vinculum, the binding tear. It is not cast with a wand, but with a single tear dropped upon an enchanted object. The object, be it a letter, a photograph, a piece of cloth, then becomes a vessel of emotional tethering. The target, once linked, feels every pang of grief the caster experienced. In 1963, a young witch named Elira Dolven used Lacrimosa vinculum to bind her ex-fiancé, Malcolm Irwin, after he left her for a wealthy pure-blood heiress. Her tear fell upon a pressed lily he had once given her during their school days. Malcolm, a promising ministry official, began exhibiting signs of mental deterioration, crying during meetings, sudden collapses, vivid hallucinations of drowning in grief. He was committed to the Janus Thickey ward, where he eventually ceased to recognize his own name. Elira was never charged. The spell could not be proven. But she vanished a year later, leaving behind only a diary with the haunting phrase, "He broke me once, now he lives inside the pieces." These are not the magics taught at Hogwarts. They are not spoken of even in hushed conversations in Knockturn Alley. They belong to the realm of what some call the Blood Echoes, a sect of dark spellcraft rooted in the primal belief that pain is power, that suffering is the last pure connection between souls, and perhaps between life and death. Albus Dumbledore once warned Harry in Half-Blood Prince, "You are protected, in short, by your ability to love." But he never said what that love, once destroyed, might unleash in a broken wizard. There are archived notes, barely legible, ink smudged with age, in the restricted section at Hogwarts that mention a spell named Umbra Fidelis. This incantation, when whispered by someone betrayed by kin, sends out a shadow that latches onto the traitor's soul, slowly dimming their joy, their trust, until they become hollow. According to these notes, a witch named Bethany Skell, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, cast it on her own brother in 1732 after he sold their family land to Muggle hunters. He was never the same. Laughter fled from him. His children were born unable to dream. By the time he died, the Skell line had vanished, as though cursed not by prophecy, but by grief made flesh. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of these spells is not the damage they do to their targets, but the mark they leave on the caster. Not all scars are visible, not all wounds bleed. Some fester in the soul, and magic, being the mirror of the heart, reflects that rot. Severus Snape once said to Harry, "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter?" But even he, master of silent, efficient dueling, avoided the blood echoes. Snape knew pain intimately, but he never used it as fuel, only as armor. There are whispered accounts that Bellatrix Lestrange once attempted Murmuris Noctem in the dungeon of Malfoy Manor after Voldemort ordered the execution of her sister Andromeda's child. But her madness, though intense, lacked true heartbreak. The spell backfired. For weeks Bellatrix spoke in reversed sentences and the walls of her cell reportedly bled. Pain is not just a weapon in these spells, it is a contract, and it does not lie. Even the wand resists. Ollivander once told Harry, "The wand chooses the wizard." But some wands reportedly reject their owners after a blood echo is cast. One wand maker, Aric Ollivander, cousin to the famous Garrick, wrote in his personal notes, "I crafted a wand from yew and thestral hair, gave it to a grieving widow. She cast something wrong. The wand cracked 3 days later. When I touched it, I heard crying." The Ministry's Department of Magical Law Enforcement, under Director Albert Rookwood, quietly tracks incidents involving suspected blood echo spells. They do not arrest the casters. Instead, they refer them to the Wand Registration Authority for re-evaluation. It is an unspoken truth. Those who use these spells are already serving a sentence harsher than Azkaban. One of the rare public testimonies came from a reformed dark witch named Thalia Vex. At a symposium in 2021, she revealed that she once used Lacrimosa vinculum on her sister after a family betrayal. "It worked," she said. "She suffered, but so did I. Every time she wept, I felt it in my sleep, as if the magic had tied us both. I learned that grief cannot be exiled, it only finds new voices. The spells that feed on pain are not evil in essence. They are raw, they are mirrors, they do not lie, they cannot be controlled. And perhaps that is what frightens the magical world most of all, that there exists a magic not of logic or intent, but of feeling, of wounds. They burn the soul not because they are cruel, but because they are honest. And in a world where magic often bends to will, these spells ask for truth. Not the truth of words, but the truth of scars, of loss, of silence that follows the last goodbye. And in that silence, perhaps, is the real incantation. Number 28. Portals of darkness exist, but no one controls them. In the quiet folds of wizarding history, there are secrets so ancient, so untouched, that even the oldest books at the bottom of the restricted section in Hogwarts Library dare only whisper about them. One of these secrets is the tale of the Dark Portals, mysterious doorways hidden in forgotten ruins, said to lead to fractured realities. Realities where time flows like water, magic bends into impossible shapes, and sanity is a candle flickering in an endless wind. The Ministry of Magic has always denied their existence. When asked, in 1993, about the possibility of trans-dimensional doorways, a stern-faced Cornelius Fudge laughed, brushing it off as children's tales twisted by a few too many butterbeers. But not everyone in the wizarding world believes the official line, especially not those who remember the tragedy of the Kilkenny expedition of 1978. Aura Griselda Marchbanks was a seasoned operative with 2 decades of dark wizard dueling behind her when she led a 6-person team to the desolate ruins near Kilkenny, Ireland. Rumours had begun to stir among local magical folk about strange lights, animal disappearances, and even an incident where an entire herd of moon calves reportedly vanished mid-run, leaving behind only circular scorch marks on the grass. The team included Aura's Tavish Muldoon, Callista Greengrass, a distant relative of the later-known Daphne, and a bright young recruit named Elias Dearborn. They camped beside the ruins for 3 days, recording odd fluctuations in magical fields. Their logbook, found months later, buried in an abandoned tent, detailed how their wands trembled of their own accord and spells fizzled into nonsense words. On the 4th day, they found the Black Ring, a perfect circle of 12 stones, each blacker than pitch, forming an unbroken line of obsidian set into the earth like a scar. Elias Dearborn's last entry, written in a hurried scrawl. The circle pulses when we get near it. Tavish walked through it. I swear I saw his eyes glow. Callista followed, then Griselda. I hear voices, but they're not speaking English, or anything. They never returned. The rest of the team who had stayed behind apparated in panic back to the ministry. They were interrogated and silenced under threat of imprisonment. One of them, Obadiah Flint, reportedly fled to the continent and never spoke again. But others in the Department of Mysteries began to ask questions, quietly. In 1985, a French unspeakable by the name of Mireille Devereux published a heavily redacted article in La Magie Ancienne, noting that some magical structures predate wand lore and language. Some are not spells, but intelligences, portals that dream. She was dismissed from her post a week later. The Hogwarts Library contains one reference, carefully concealed in the footnotes of Magical Ruins of the Old World by Bathilda Bagshot. She writes, "Some claim that in the ruins of Castle Knocker, Kilkenny, the stones hum with a sorrowful sound on the night of a blood moon. Children dare each other to sleep near the site. None have stayed longer than an hour." Hermione Granger once commented during her 5th year, flipping through a tattered copy of Bagshot's work, "This is fascinating, but why would the Ministry refuse to even investigate something so significant?" Harry remembered the way her voice dropped, unsure whether she was more afraid of what was there or of what might be trying to get out. Albus Dumbledore himself once alluded to certain doors in the fabric of magic best left unopened during a private conversation with Minerva McGonagall, recorded in her personal notes years later. "Not all magic belongs to our world, Minerva. Some belongs to older things, deeper than fear, darker than night." One of the most disturbing accounts came not from an aura or unspeakable, but from a child. In 1996, a boy named Thomas Cadwallader, aged 9, living with his squib grandmother near Ballyragget, wandered too far from home. He was found 3 days later, curled in the grass outside the Kilkenny ruins, eyes open, completely mute. When he finally spoke weeks later, he said, "They wear no faces, but they smile, and they asked me if I wanted to stay." What exists beyond these portals, if they truly are portals, is a matter of intense debate among magical theorists. Some, like Professor Emeric Vane of the Edinburgh Arcane College, suggest they lead to collapsed magical timelines, remnants of failed universes where magic broke itself apart. Others insist they're feeding grounds for thought creatures, invisible beings sustained by memory and fear. One piece of evidence remains particularly chilling. In the storage vaults of the Department of Mysteries, secured behind triple-sealed runes, lies the Mirror Letter. It was discovered near the Kilkenny site in 1992, inscribed on mirrored glass in reversed ancient runes. Deciphered by cursebreaker Lydia Stenwick, the translation reads, "You have opened what should have stayed sealed. You have touched what does not belong. We see you now. You will forget us, but we will not forget you." Stenwick retired shortly after the translation. She moved to an isolated cottage in the Scottish Highlands, surrounded her home with protective enchantments, and never answered a single owl. What's most perplexing is that no known wizarding family claims responsibility for creating such portals. They are absent from the records of the founders, do not appear in any of the scrolls of Morgana, Merlin, or even the dark writings of Herpo the Foul, as if the magic that birthed them came not from any wand, but from something far more primordial.